This is Money Made Simple, the financial podcast that keeps it simple and gets to the point.
Kia ora and welcome back to the show. So today we are going to talk about your net worth, understanding it and why it's important. So a big concept that Sam talks about in his book is this idea that it's the way that we think about money which will have a huge impact on how much we'll accrue, so how much we'll have over time, and actually how happy we are. Jenny, why is that?
Yes. So when it comes to finances, it's easy to think it's all about dollars and cents. But according to our co-founder, Amanda Morrell, the real currency of money is emotion. So our views about how much we have, how little we have, whether that's enough, all ties into our psychology. If you want to be the master of your money, you really need to understand your relationship to it. And that's because your emotions and your underlying beliefs about money, some of which you may have inherited from your family or your upbringing, they really dictate your behavior, so your spending and saving habits.
So it's not all black and white dollars and cents.
No, some of it's about our feelings. And if you aren't aware of these things, then you're unlikely to be fully in control of your money. And at the moment, with what we're referring to as a cost of living crisis, emotions are even higher than usual, and we may feel even less in control of our finances than usual, more at the mercy of these sort of big, scary national or even global processes, high interest, inflation, that kind of thing.
And I think just one thing to note there is you notice that in the mood, I guess, of the nation. People are feeling more angry, more scared. And a lot of that is actually to do with money.
Yeah, we're worried. We're worried about what our future looks like and whether we can afford to live the life that we want to live. But when all these big things are happening out there in the world, we need to bring it back to ourselves and think about what we can do, what we do have control over. So one way to get a good mindset about money is thinking in terms of net worth. So most of us think about the money we have in terms of what we've got to spend at the end of the week or how much money we've got in our pocket. But actually the more important number is your or your family's net worth.
Yeah, and just with regards to thinking about kind of what you've got only to spend in the moment, while that is totally valid, especially in these times, it doesn't necessarily let us think about the bigger picture or help plan for our long-term choices. We're kind of stuck in this short-term cycle of worrying and making choices for the now that may not be so good for the later us. And it's those long-term decisions which will actually help us have better choices and more freedom later in life. And that's where this kind of concept of net worth comes in, Jenny? But, I mean, how does it work?
So it's a really simple calculation to figure out your net worth. You just take the things that you own and could sell, so your assets, and you subtract the things that you owe. So even if week to week things are pretty tight for a lot of us right now, if you have a KiwiSaver account or you've paid off some of your mortgage, you might actually find that you're better off than you think.
And understanding that you're actually in a bit better position than you thought, being in a little better mindset about your finances could actually encourage you to take more simple steps to keep improving your long-term finances rather than focusing on the short-term, like the firefighting stuff.
Yeah.
And just a note, and we might put this in the show notes, is that a really great resource to easily and simply calculate your net worth, and we go on about this all the time, but it's because they're great, is sorted.org,
Yes.
so the government website, and that provides in their tools section a calculator to enable you to calculate your own net worth.
So maybe it's worth pausing here and having a think about what you should and shouldn't include when you're calculating your net worth. Can you tell us a little bit about what we mean by assets and liabilities?
Of course. Okay, so basically the things we own, our assets, you can divide up into two broad categories. So we have what we call financial assets, and then we have non-financial assets. So financial assets are things that will over time grow in value. I guess they're kind of the good assets. And then your non-financial assets are things that will depreciate, lose their value over time. So some examples of financial assets could be houses, so your own home or investment properties, your savings, whether they be in the bank or other, investments in shares or managed funds, in art, whatever you invest in. So, and of course, really important one to remember, your KiwiSaver investment. So again, very much an important asset to use to calculate your net worth. On the other side of it, non-financial assets. So these are things that you own that you shouldn't use to calculate, things like cars, if you are lucky enough to have a boat, sports equipment, say your surfboards, snowboards, clothes. So these things shouldn't be included, basically because they don't hold their value. They do what we call depreciate. They might be really important to you. I love my surfboard, and that provides heaps of fun, but they usually, with some exceptions of course, that they become worth less and less over time. Also, probably wouldn't be that easy to sell off in a hurry.
Right.
So financial assets include in your net worth calculations. Non-financial assets, the things that we accrue, don't include.
And then what about liabilities?
Of course, on the other side of the net worth calculation, so you add up all your financial assets, like what we discussed, and minus or subtract any debt that you hold. These are your liabilities. So debt can be anything that you owe. So that could be mortgage debt, credit card debt, that high interest stuff, personal loans, any buy now, pay later, anything that you owe to anyone would be considered a liability. So that would be what you subtract away from your assets to calculate your net worth.
Okay then, so it's a simple calculation, but there's a few things to figure out in terms of what you might include in there, and then you're going to end up with a number, and that number is your net worth.
Yeah. So we kind of understand how we calculate it, and we obviously have a great website that can help you do that, insorted.org. But why does understanding your net worth help so much?
Thinking about net worth really just changes the way you think about money and the decisions that you're making. So it's going to get you focused on increasing your assets rather than worrying about exactly how much disposable income you have in the week or how much money you have in your pocket. And it's going to get you focused on reducing your liabilities, so trying to reduce any debt that you have. Basically, thinking in terms of net worth will help you make better long-term decisions, and it'll give you a more secure financial future. Once you understand and think in terms of net worth, it's easier to work out how increasing this worth will actually unlock more choices for you in the future. For example, how much you're going to be able to travel or eat out, or maybe you've got more expensive activities that you want to do. And having these choices is really what gives you a sense of freedom and dignity in life.
So Jenny just talked about increasing your assets and decreasing your liabilities where possible. And compounding returns apply, so any assets that you have are likely to grow in terms of worth. So that really helps if we're doing that, whereas compounding debt has the opposite effect. Yes. We will cover compounding returns in more detail in future episodes. Another point around why it's important to think about net worth is the idea of financial independence. So when you could retire comfortably. There's a thing that you might have heard of called the rule of 4%. So this is basically a calculation that estimates how much that you'd need to comfortably live on without earning more money. So if you wanted to reduce your hours worked or retire, stop working, whatever age, whether that be, say at 50 if you're lucky, or 65 or 80 if you just love work or need to keep working. And that rule is around 4%. So basically what you need to do is to calculate the total amount you need that you could comfortably withdraw 4% of it each year.
So that's great. I know that you have goals to retire early, which is amazing.
We'll see if it happens.
For the rest of us, is it better, do you think, to have cash in the bank, which can make us feel good to be able to see that balance sitting in our bank account, or is it better to invest or focus our efforts on other types of assets, as you mentioned earlier?
So I'm pretty strong on that. You'll notice a lot of what you'd call rich people are actually quite cash poor. So those that are quite financially savvy tend not to leave money sitting in the bank. That's to say over and above what they need day to day. So whatever their style of living is, what they would tend to spend. And obviously for emergencies. So we'll talk later on about how important a rainy day fund is, but we'll leave that for now. So making sure that you have what you need ongoing, plus if anything, particularly bad happens. These people instead will often have multiple houses, potentially, or a lot tied up in long-term investments, shares, other assets. And why, you ask? Because these are assets that either earn them an income, so passive income, you'll hear a bit about that, or they grow in value, so capital gains, for example, in houses. KiwiSaver funds, note, fit into this category as well, so one of your most important investments. So even if you're not starting from much, we can basically all look at ways to increase, whether slowly or quickly, our financial assets and decrease our liabilities. So cutting unnecessary costs, increasing your KiwiSaver contributions, starting a managed fund and having that on auto invest so money goes out of your bank account into your investments automatically on payday, so you never even notice it was there. So that's all about only having what you need in your everyday accounts and then letting the rest of it work for you, letting the power of compounding interest apply. And all of these actions that we take can become more obvious once you understand that power and the importance of your net worth, because you're thinking in terms of how to increase your long-term and financial assets rather than the money that you have to spend right now. It's kind of like a little bit like short-term pain, or more accurately, mild compromises versus the long-term gains, which will way outweigh the short-term compromises in terms of the choices that they'll give you later on.
Fantastic. So those are the things that we can do, and that is about securing a more a better financial future.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But if we go back to one of my earlier comments around the currency of wealth not being about dollars and cents, but about emotion, then I think that thinking about money in terms of net worth, increasing your financial assets, decreasing your liabilities, and making decisions focused more on the long term is going to help you feel more in control and start to feel more secure. So you'll be less worried about the ups and downs of the economy or anything unexpected happening. You will be more focused on the other more important things in your life. So this isn't an overnight change, what we've just been talking about. There's some really big and important things that you might have to change in your life to make this happen, but it's definitely something that you can start working on straight away, and it will have a positive impact both on your emotions and your money mindset and also on your future financial security.
So win-win-win.
Exactly.
Cool.
So I think we've got net worth covered. I think we do, and why it's a great idea to think about money in this way.
Absolutely. So next week we are going to be discussing the magic of compounding interest and why Albert Einstein actually called it the eighth wonder of the world, and why that's relevant to KiwiSaver and investments and your finances.
Great. Can't wait. See you there.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. Until next week. Bye. This podcast contains personal opinions and is intended to provide educational information only. It doesn't relate to your particular financial situation or goals and is not financial advice or recommendations. Simplicity New Zealand Limited is the issuer of the Simplicity KiwiSaver scheme and investment funds. For product disclosure statements, please visit Simplicity's website, simplicity.kiwi.